Come light it up, I'm ready to go. Come light it up, come light it up, I'm ready to go. Come light it
Thanks, Monica. My name's Matt Fuller, co-founder and VP of product here at Starburst, and I'll be moderating today's panel. I guess to start, I'd like to do some introductions, including saying your name, the company you founded, and your position there. Also share something that you enjoy doing outside of work. So, for example, I enjoy spending time with my kids outside of work. Let's start with you, Max. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Max. I'm a founder and CEO at a company called Preset, where we offer a managed service and all sorts of bells and whistles around an open source project called Apache Superset that I started while I was at Airbnb about 6-7 years ago. I also started another project called Apache Airflow that's pretty well known in the data space. And then before that, I had a career, or I've been working with data, big data forward companies like Facebook, Yahoo, Airbnb, and Lyft, just as a data practitioner, data engineer. And something about me, so I love to snowboard, and now my kids snowboard and ski too. So relocated to Tahoe during COVID, and trying to snowboard as much as I can up here in Heavenly. So it's been awesome to be close to the mountain.
Oh, that's really cool. What about you, Michelle?
Yeah, so I'm Michel. I'm the co-founder and the CEO of Airbyte. So Airbyte is a open source data integration platform, and we help companies get access to all their different data silos, whether it's a database, a SaaS product, an API, files, you name it. And I've been in the data space for the past 15 years, and I worked at different scale of data, internet scale, finance scale, IoT scale. And what I enjoy to do outside of work, I would say, is really about spending time with my kids, for sure. It's making as much time as I can for them.
Yeah, that's great. And you, Drew?
Yeah, hey, Drew Bannon, co-founder at DBT Labs, head of product. I'm based in Philadelphia, PA. Max, not as close to the mountains as you are. I've been killing time over the past couple of years, like baking. I made croissants around Christmas, which, it's like a 2-day labor of love, but it came out actually pretty good.
Cool. So I guess to start, I'm going to start with kind of a section I call founder confessions. And kind of in the early days of foundership, it requires a lot of grit. And as part of that, there's some good stories to be told. Sometimes you have to think outside of the box as a way to woo customers. And I wanted to ask each of you about kind of like the craziest, situation you found yourself in to win a customer or even salvage a failure at the beginning of your company. And I'll start. I'll tell a story that I like to tell here. It become a little bit of a legend here. But in our early days, we were trying to sell to a footwear, apparel, sport equipment company, and we eventually did win them as a customer. But the night before an on-site meeting, I realized that the sneakers that I had were that of a competitor's. I was busy, so I told my co-founder and CEO Justin Borgman my size, and he went out and bought me a pair of sneakers. The challenge was they ended up being 2 sizes too small, and they were very inexpensive looking. They were bright white and so on. I was a little embarrassed, but when I got there, got some good compliments, probably because they didn't have a scuff on them and were bright white. But probably unlikely the reason why we won them as a customer, but just something that I've just wanted to show respect and put on a good impression. And the funny part about that is because they were 2 sizes too small, during the whole meeting, like my feet were numb, almost like you had put on a ski boot that was just too tight. And so I was like wiggling my toes the whole time to keep the blood circulating. And then I had to go to the airport immediately after, and I think I held up the security line trying to get those shoes off so I could go through the scanner. So I don't know, that's a story I like to tell. So maybe we'll start with you, Drew. Do you have any kind of funny or crazy story you'd like to share?
Right on. Yeah, I don't have anything quite as painful as that anecdote, but
Yeah.
I do remember, we're called DBT Labs today. Back in the day, though, we were called Fishtown Analytics. We were a bootstrapped consultancy. We made open source software. And so we did a lot of consulting. And one of my very first consulting engagements was with a team based in New York City. I was on site and I was supposed to help them with tuning Redshift performance. So this was actually like kind of the origin stories of DBT. I was in there, we were doing sort keys, disk keys, column encodings, vacuums. Did that for like 2 days. And then at lunch, I was hacking on DBT, open source. And the head of data, Scott B over there, Scott Brightnother. It's like, hey, what are you working on? And that's how this team found out about DBT, and it sort of like set, the rest of the trajectory for the product as folks in New York City learned about it. So that was my kind of like half fail on the consulting side, but kind of win on DBT adoption side story.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Yeah. What about you, Max? Do you have anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, I was thinking of a story, but I'm just going to talk a little bit about how half-baked or pre-alpha was in the first product that we launched. So I think it's good advice, and it's advice that we heard early too, is, go early, like put something together, get your product in customers' hands as soon as you can. And we followed those instructions, but, that was doing pen testing, doing, any sort of compliance work. We just kind of hardwired something together that worked to a point where, we had to instruct our early customers to use public data or use data that they wouldn't mind if it leaked, or unsensitive data as far as they were concerned. So we had a first wave of people that we were instructing to just be really careful with this thing, low guarantee, very half-baked, a little bit of duct tape and chicken wire just to get something working. I think that pushed us, that allowed us to get some feedback, get stuff working before we got, we went alpha and had a proper, secure, product that worked well.
Yeah, that's great. And Michelle, do you have anything?
Yeah.
You'd like to share?
So it's not about Airbyte per se, but it's about the product that inspired Airbyte. And it was more geared toward marketing teams, always about data, always about integrating data. And we had this, I think it was the second customer that were landing with that product. And it was pre-COVID, so we could still go into offices at that time. And just had a call with their head of data over there, and he said, okay, we really need to have that. And say, okay, fine, you know what, in 40 minutes I will be in your office to install this tag on your website. We did not have the feature, and I walked down to that office, and I was on the phone with one of our founding engineer, just going through, okay, let's build that feature while I'm walking down to this office. Let's deploy it, and let's make sure that when I install the tag, it starts working. But it was really live feature development with a customer. Just, as Maxime said, at the beginning, you have to do what you need to do to get people through.
Yeah, exactly. You gotta do whatever it takes. That's actually kind of a motto we have here at Starburst. You gotta do what it takes. I guess maybe, or I'll start with you, Michelle, is kind of a little bit related to that, but because you mentioned, something prior, or what inspired Airbyte. I'm curious, like what did you start out to do at the beginning of founding Airbyte, and does it differ from, what you're actually doing now, or perhaps you, pivoted a little bit in and, going back and forth, just kind of curious, how you've progressed.
Yeah. So the thing is, when we started with John, it was really a strong conviction on the problem space that needed to have something to be addressed in it. Just the problem space is so huge that now the first few months were just about, okay, we have a problem. What kind of product do we need to build? And the problem space for us was just access to data. And yeah, as I say, we really started on a very marketing oriented product, going for still data integration, but it was meant for an audience that maybe we're a bit less familiar with, maybe we resonated a little bit less with. And COVID actually accelerated us pivoting away from that product and refocus on what are the strengths of the founders. And our strengths are around dev tools, around talking to data engineers every day. So we stayed in the same problem space, but we completely changed what the product looked like and who we are actually selling or giving the product to. And I won't say that we did not try to go a little bit outside of data integration at some point, but yeah, we explored things around, I don't know, 401k, virtual assistant, but very, very quickly got back to our roots.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Yeah. What about you, Max? Did you go through product iterations of your own to where you've eventually landed now?
Yeah, I'm gonna try to tell the story of the genesis of Superset and how it got created. So I joined Airbnb in 2014, I believe, and that was coming from Facebook, and Facebook was a super interesting place at that time where people had like democratized data super widely. There was a lot of homegrown data tools, a lot of like internal innovation around kind of Apache Hadoop ecosystem. That includes Presto and a lot of tools that were really interesting, and some of the tools that had been very much like reinvented from scratch, right? So not designed after what existed in the market at the time. We had to kind of reinvent everything for scale of the data problem at Facebook, like on a petabyte scale. And then we had to people there had to reinvent also like tools that would scale from a people standpoint too, right? So that everyone could work with data every day. Everyone was super analytic driven, right? Everyone was very curious about data. They hired a lot of like very data-minded people. So joining Airbnb was a little bit behind in terms of like the data tooling and just like there's an opportunity to innovate there and fill the gap. So originally I started Apache Airflow because there was no good scheduler there or like something to write solid data pipeline. So started with that, and then came probably like a year in or so, there was a 3-day hackathon coming up. So I'm like, okay, I got to build something for this 3-day hackathon. I got to find something new. And I discovered Apache Druid, which is one of these in-memory real-time database that I thought was really interesting and very similar to a product that existed internally at Facebook that was not open source called Scuba. So Scuba is this in-memory, super fast database that's real-time. So for every stream of data at Facebook, it would end up sampled or perhaps sampled, perhaps not sampled, but in real time in Scuba. So you could analyze pretty much any stream of data in real time, super fast. And it's a database that guarantees sub-second result on all queries. And the trade-off for that is like sampling or some other like probabilistic type approach to things. So discovering Druid, I was like, I'm going to write like a front end for Druid. I was looking for so Apache Druid is open source. There was no front end for it because I believe Meta Markets, who had built Druid at the time, were selling a front end on top of it. So there was nothing that existed on top of it. So I was like, I'm going to build a front end kind of inspired by the Scuba front end for, fast-paced real-time in-memory slice and dicing. And so that was like the first version of Superset. And eventually, we realized that there's just a need for very easy access to data and kind of like point to a data set, create a chart. So made it work with Presto at the time, or Trino, formerly known as Presto. I don't know how to call it anymore. But yeah, so made that early version of Superset, like this data explorer UI, kind of work with both Presto and Druid, eventually like all databases, and that's what kind of turned into Superset that we know today.
Yeah, it's super interesting, and as I'm sure we see a lot of correlation between people who use Superset and Trino. So it's very interesting, the complementary technologies there.
Totally.
And Drew, you shared earlier kind of the kind of the birth or inspiration of DBT. I'm curious, any after that, any iterations that you've gone through since then that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I actually would rewind and go kind of back from that moment,
Okay.
which was kind of like liftoff, because it's, DBT, the sort of core feeling of the product hasn't changed too much in the past 6 years. It's still like, building objects in the warehouse, but can talk a little bit about sort of where it came from. And really the answer is cloud data warehouses. The advent of, Redshift in 2014 kind of changed how everyone approached storing data and set off this like entire domino effect that sort of, has gotten us to today. So back in probably 2015, 2016, I was an intern in college and I was working part-time at a company called RJ Metrics in Philadelphia. So I was the intern. I was working on some marketing, automation, operations stuff. I got a computer science degree. And, RJ Metrics was this kind of all-in-one BI experience. So it would load data, it would transform data, you could define metrics, it would do BI, charting, dashboarding, stuff like that. And then Redshift came to market. And then there were some BI tools in the modern data stack. And we saw products like Fivetran come up, back then. And so RJ Metrics was looking around. It's like, oh, this whole product is becoming many different products, entire different categories. We need to sort of get with the times. So we started working on this internal, new product. It was, I think back then called the Bare Bones Data Pipeline, which became the company Stitch Data, acquired by Talend, so on. And, we just saw like the data that you get in the warehouse, if you connect directly to Salesforce and sort of load it into a database, whatever data lake, you name it, it's like not ready to analyze. You have to do a lot of transformation of that data. You have to like test your assumptions, you have to version control code. So that was actually the impetus for DBT in the first place. Like we got Salesforce data in Redshift and we thought this is not usable. I can't actually analyze this. So fast forward today and, the ecosystem has evolved so far beyond that in terms of like places where data lives and how you query it, BI experiences, other data applications. So it really all nucleated, I think, from this moment back in 2014, 2015 for us.
And I guess I'll share my story a bit. It mirrors some of your stories as well of like what we had set out to do and eventually pivoted a bit, but like all kind of founding stories are unique. We had recognized the growth of Presto, which now known as Trino, and we had built expertise around this open source project, and we wanted to build the business towards it, but we weren't exactly sure what the product was going to look like. So we started out selling support and services essentially, and we had this unique opportunity to kind of build a profitable business before taking on investment. And during that time, we were able to listen deeply to our customers and understand the pain that they had, the problems they're trying to solve, and kind of limitations with the existing solutions and product on market. So it was really through this that we built our product based on Trino. And found that product market fit and ultimately decided to scale the business with investment. So, similar to, Drew, you were mentioning you were doing, consulting in the early days. Like we were essentially doing that for Trino while we were figuring out what the product wanted to look like. So it's interesting how, these stories are all unique in their own way, but there are, overlapping themes.
Yeah. And, Matt, I would just totally recommend that as an approach. It's not always viable, but when you can prove an idea and, pay yourself with consulting and get, real customers to use this stuff, it really is helpful versus the alternative of raising money. You have an idea and you got to figure everything out, pretty quickly. It's nice to have time to let the ideas bake.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and another path, that's becoming common too is like kind of the path that I followed, which is like, again, incubating a project at a large company, using a vehicle like a software foundation to make it kind of more public domain and then start a company around it. And, I already have, hundreds or thousands of companies using the product at scale. So that's, another potential path that's becoming pretty common.
Maybe I'd start with you, Max, like, building a company, based on an open source project. What are some of the benefits, you've seen or you know, you've kind of touched on this briefly, but like, you know, how did that help show product market fit?
Yeah, in some ways, like there's a proxy for product market fit that you could call like project community fit, right? That's
Yeah.
like, you know, the project solves a real problem for real companies. I think by the time I started Preset, I'm certain there was like, you know, thousands of companies. You never know exactly how many people use the open source project in the wild, and there's some kind of ethic concerns, and the Apache Software Foundation is not super open to doing a lot of instrumentation or just telemetry on the open source community. But there's a lot of proxies to get a sense of, you know, how many organizations use the product, whether it be, you know, activity in the Slack community or activity on GitHub. You kind of get a sense for the scale there. But yeah, so a lot of validation up front. A lot of ways, you know, one way to think about it too is, you know, the top of funnel, right? Kind of creating opportunities and conversations. And, you know, in our case, our relevance in this world is related to the merit that we have around Apache Superset, right? It's really a meritocracy, and that merit is what fuels a lot of the interest and deals and like the viability of the company in a lot of ways. So I think like nurturing the community. So maybe in some ways, like instead of investing in marketing or more traditional marketing or brand marketing or, you know, any form of marketing, we invest in the community. And the premise, and I think that's been proven, you know, at scales with companies like Databricks and Confluent and Imply and many others, the idea is like there's these nice virtuous cycles you can get spinning between the commercial entity, investing in the community, investing in the product, the open source, you know, code and software, and then this bringing a flow of people that want to, you know, the best managed service for that piece of software. Maybe they don't want to be on call for it. They don't want to have to do release management or just like have the burden of like security and compliance and all these things. So I think it's becoming like a pretty recognized, you know, and people tend to understand that the best people to run a piece of software is the people who write the software, right? So when Amazon comes along, it's like, hey, we also have a, you know, a Trino service, or we also have a DBT cloud service of our own. People tend to understand that if they want the latest, greatest, well-managed, and get those virtual cycles to keep spinning, they should go where the merit is, you know. So that's it, and it's working. I think for all of us, it's like we're kind of following a model that's working well. That's very virtuous, where everybody wins.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Drew, I'm curious your thoughts, and in particular, you know, DBT has been a core part of the modern data stack as well. So in addition to the, you know, adoption of the project, it's you've also kind of helped an ecosystem as well. I'm kind of curious your thoughts from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you the very hardest part of kicking off an commercial open source business is like explaining it to your family at Thanksgiving. Tech in general is hard, but like no one's uncle is going to understand. Like, you give it away for free? Why would you do that?
Yeah.
You should have asked me. It's like, no, we got this one. Yeah, I think that for something like DBT in particular, it's fundamentally about the workflow and collaboration, different people solving different problems, but together. So for a very long time, people have, you know, found ways to run SQL against databases. That's not the core innovation of DBT. It's sort of the way that we approach it. And what we found and what we believed from the very beginning is that this business logic is as important as the data itself. So you can have mountains of data. If you can't actually interpret it, convert it into information, put it in front of people, and have them semantically like understand what it means, data is not actually useful. It's actually like overhead. It's not like insightful. So the business logic is so key, and we've always believed that, you know, DBT, if you treat it as a language, a compiler, something like that, it's like these things are open source. Tristan has said this very well. It's like not viable to have a programming language where if statements are locked up behind a commercial license. Like, yeah, you can do everything you want, but you're going to branch, you got to pay us. Like, it's not actually like viable. So we think that people, you know, should own their logic, which is what happens if you're using an open source tool. It's portable. And we see that people kind of appreciate that and respond well to it, and I think they get a lot of benefit out of knowing that they can trust that this is their information and they can take it with them if they ever choose to. That's all powered by open source.
And what about you? What about you, Michelle? What benefits have you seen with your project, or things you'd like to add?
Yeah. So first of all, to go on what Maxime said, we did not have the luxury of incubating Airbyte in a different company. So we basically, as we started Airbyte, we had to battle on many fronts. First one was building the product. Second one was also building the community. Still remember the beginning of 2021 where just me, John, our founding teams was just on Slack all day. Half of our time was spent on helping the community on a product that was extremely MVP at the time. So a lot of support to do. And the second half was really, okay, let's take on everything we've learned during that day. Let's make sure we fix it in the product, release a new version, and get this core community member to use it. One thing also is we've actually been very specific about instrumenting the open source software. So we have information, whether it's anonymous or whether people are okay sharing their identity, but we have a very good sense of how people are using Airbyte. So we know where we have faulty like services into Airbyte. We know what type of volume people are processing through Airbyte. And that has actually helped us a lot on product roadmap and on fundraising as well, because like Maxime called it project community fit, we call it project market fit, which is for open source is like the first step before product market fit. And getting all this usage data, getting a sense of what type of company are using your product, this has helped tremendously for us. And we got a sense of, okay, what is the profile of companies that are just downloading, testing a little bit, but not moving to production with Airbyte, and what is the profile of companies that are actually using Airbyte every single day. And I think if people engage in the open source journey, having a sense of how people are using your product and having, yes, the qualitative version when you're on Slack, having a quantitative one is, we live in the world of analytics and data. I think we need to have this type of insight because it is so valuable for everything you do in terms of product development, fundraising, and making sure you're building the right product and the right project for your community.
A quick extra comment on the whole commercial open source model. So we're talking about all the really positive things about it too. So I want to point out some of the challenges that come with that. So one is, the ability for anyone else to come and package the open source software and offer a managed service on top of it. AWS is notorious for doing that, right, at scale, and they do that very well. So that's one potential challenge. I think the edge there is the people write the software are the better people to manage it and offer services around it. That's one. And the other one is just losing potentially to the open source project, where there's people that just use DBT core, are very happy with it, and they're I don't really need DBT cloud, or personas here, no Git, or for whatever reason they decided it's sufficient. So that part there kind of forces the commercial open source company type entities to build more differentiator from the open source, to build what we call crust around that core, and build something compelling, then really kind of think actively about how much we contribute back to open source versus build differentiator, kind of bells and whistles and crust around it. And that's something that we spend a lot of time thinking about to make sure we build a viable business that can invest in the open source community too.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And also that's why it's important to make the difference between project market fit and product market fit. Is the person also that is using it or that is operating, in the case of DBT, it might be a bit different, but when it's a set of servers that you need to actually operate, the persona that is using and is also a bit different. And if it's open source, and you're not operating the system. So you have to make sure that everything that goes wrong with your product, with the project, is bubbled up to the operator. When you, I mean, for us, it's a cloud offering. The operator is us. So we don't need to just bubble up all these problems or information to the users. And this is something where, as you go for monetization, you need to really understand what is the value you provide and adapt the product accordingly. So we don't need, like, data integration, for example, it always fails. That's the nature of data integration. And there are errors that you don't need to bubble up on a cloud user because it's going to solve by itself, or we're going to do something in the backend to actually solve it. And that's where it's not just a direct translation. You need to figure out, yes, what is the outside layer of open source that you need to build to actually make it a viable product that you can monetize.
Yeah, great points all around. And this conversation about value creation and value capture is kind of the heart of it. We've always believed that if we create as much value as possible, the opportunity to capture value as well and like have a sustainable, high functioning business will be there. Max, you touched on AWS, and I remember a lot of maybe brouhaha, we can call it, around like hosting Elasticsearch, like Mongo, DocumentDB, things like that.
Redis, yeah, like tension,
totally.
change of licenses, right? Drama in communities too, right?
So there's a lot of that, and the other cautionary tale that folks talk about is Docker, and how Docker created an enormous amount of value, but was not able to capture an appropriate amount of it, commercially. But increasingly, as time passes, I don't know, I've read one article, maybe it wasn't the exactly right, someone can fact check me, but it seems like Docker is actually commercially doing okay right now. Like Mongo, Elastic, as far as I know, doing great. So I don't know, I think that like the story is still being written, and it feels actually less clear cut to me today than it did a couple of years ago when we were at the height of sort of the panic around this.
Yeah, so I guess to close things up here, there may be some future founders in the crowd listening today, and I thought it might be beneficial to hear a word of advice from each one of you in this group. So I'll start with you, Drew. If you had a time machine, do you have any wisdom to share with the younger self during the early stages of being a founder?
It's a really good question. I think from my current vantage point, I have kind of internalized that it's a marathon, not a sprint. If we want to be here for the long haul, you got to take care of yourself, take care of your people. I, did the 70, 80-hour weeks replying to DBT community Slacks at 11 p.m. on the weekends. Like, did that for a couple of years. It was valuable. I'm glad I did it. It was fulfilling. But if I want to be doing this for another decade, it's important to take some time to rest and recuperate too. So it's a long journey. If you want to be at the finish line, just take care of yourself.
Yeah, and Max, what are the signs to look for that may indicate that it's time to take an idea and turn it into a company?
I don't know, critical mass, or I don't know. I think that you have to feel. I think there's a point, I think, at which I realized that both, so say for Airflow, at some point I realized that if I was to try to stop the project and destroy it, and not that I would ever want to do that, but it had taken a life of its own to a point where not just like me say giving up on it, or me actively trying to destroy the project would not stop it, because it was just a very like an unstoppable force that had a life of its own, and that happened with Superset too. And I think maybe that's a good point of no return, where you're like, okay, the community is self-sustaining in many ways, right? Even if, say, Airbnb was to stop sponsoring the project, it would live on to become something great. One thing I want to do, so we have like a founder panel here too. So I think like one piece of advice is like, we all romanticize the idea of being a founder and raising VC money and starting your own company. I think it's a really great thing, was really great experience for me, but you're kind of guaranteed to be out of your comfort zone, or to be pushed, on the outer edge of your comfort zone for the foreseeable future, probably like, realistically like 4, 6, 10 years. And that's something that's really great for your personal growth, to be kind of just always on the edge of your comfort zone, but it's also like something really intense to sign up for, right? And it's difficult given the context to say like, hey, I'm just going to stay in my comfort zone. I think there are ways to kind of mitigate and manage that. But in general, I think you're making that decision of like really pushing yourself into a big marathon. So you got to get ready for that and make sure that's really kind of what you want, and get some good people around you, get some good investors, good early customers, good co-founders, good early employees, people you trust, before you jump.
And what about you, Michelle? Is there something you wish you implemented either personally or professionally, earlier that would have been kind of an asset to you as a founder?
I think I've learned more so I've tried several times to start something, but I always try to do it in parallel of my of working somewhere else. And basically you end up having two very like time consuming thing that you need to do every single day. One which is your, let's call it your day job, the other one which is your entrepreneur journey, and you end up doing neither well. I mean, when do you take customer call if you're building something during the night? And how do you do your job well during the day if the only thing you think about is what you're going to be working on in the evening? And I've tried a few times. Actually, I've also tried with John, my co-founder. We did one of them like that. And you end up really burning yourself out. And, to go back on romanticizing this idea of being a founder, it's you have to take a leap of faith once you have an idea. And if you really want to do it, you have to do it 100%, like 150%, because you're going to be outside of your comfort zone all the time. And for me, that's more an advice I wish I had given myself in the past. Is it's hard, when you burn yourself out on like two very different things. So instead, just make the jump and do it if you really feel like you can do it and you're ready to be pushed to your limits.
And I think I think a few of us, or maybe all of us, mentioned some degree of like making sure you don't get burned out or getting close to burned out, or putting in 80-hour weeks. And it truly is a marathon, not a sprint. I think we all said that. And I wish I told my younger self that in the early days. It really isn't as easy as it may look sometimes, but it's been a truly humbling experience. When I look back at my younger self, I'm like, wow, I was pretty naive back then, but maybe that was to my advantage. Because it is hard. If it were easy, everyone would be doing this. But I guess what I would say is, like, to those of you out there that are thinking about starting something, and these things haven't scared you away, or we haven't convinced you not to do it, then you absolutely should make that leap. It is such a unique and rewarding experience, whether it's helping customers solve their pain, or sometimes customers may even join you as an employee to help continue to build something great. You're helping employees grow in their careers, and ultimately they may start a company or join a founding team somewhere. And there's this really great support system among founders. And then repeat. One of you may be on a panel providing similar advice one day. But it's just been such a great experience, and something I'd recommend to anyone who wants to and willing to do it. So highly recommend it.
YOLO.
Hey, Matt, just since you touched on it, the support system is really key. And I at least would want to offer a couple words of gratitude to, certainly founders, other folks that have been very generous with their time, family, partner, friends. It's like you get a lot of the stress, in the first conversation after leaving work, and then you got to break that down and go, okay, I'm ready to ready to be a person again. So a lot of
Yeah.
gratitude for all those folks along the way.
Same here, and offering that too. I think like sometimes you think people are hard to reach or get through. For the people listening that are interested in maybe considering that, I think we might all be reachable. I'm reachable, right? If you're curious, you want some advice and you want to hear the story or a certain aspect of it, and you're on the edge of taking that leap of faith, reach out to me. You can find me on Twitter, other places. I'm sure everyone on the panel here is reachable. In some ways, we have limited time, but we welcome those type of conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, our time is limited, but I always seem to find time to want to talk to someone who wants to be an entrepreneur and start something else. It's just something I love doing.